people confuse being on dialysis and having kidney problems. So when you're on dialysis, you don't have a functioning kidneys. So you have to worry about protein in those instances because you can't handle it. But most people with any functioning kidneys, there's really no harm, and there's no data for that one. And actually, people improve. I have people with diabetes who have protein leaking in the urine, and then once they reverse the diabetes, eating a ton of protein, the protein goes away and the kidney function improves. And we see that, and there's data that the kidney function does improve. So there's a lot of bad information, unfortunately, and people get scared. They don't want to harm themselves. And I keep getting the same questions on social media. And that's why I'm getting a little bit more kind of in your face, blunt, uh, just to get the message across that there's really no harm eating real food.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We have a special guest today. We've got Dr. Jarrouge here. Good morning. Can you hear me? And you might have to unmute you. Let me ask you to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't letting me unmute. So,
Good,
hey,
good.
Shawn, how are you?
It's good to see you. How you been doing? I have to say, I've enjoyed watching your continued advocacy on social media.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
Gotten
Thanks for inviting me back. I was surprised when Felice reached out to me, so that was nice.
No, you've been more and more sort of, I want to say, how do I say this? A little more in your face with some of the stuff you're doing,
Yeah,
which I think is important. I think we have to really be vocal about, this thing, because we have such a problem, with health in general. And I think there's issues with the healthcare system and so on and so forth. So, just to remind folks that don't remember or don't know who you are, could you just remind us a little bit about yourself?
yeah. I'm Elie Jarrouge. I'm a traditionally trained physician. Graduated in 2008 and did residency training in Houston, Baylor College of Medicine, in internal medicine and nephrology, kidney disease. And I worked for 9 years at the hospital. Last time I talked to you, I was still a full-time hospitalist, where I take care of patients inside the hospital with complication for a lot of chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, do you name it. And with my own journey with health, I slowly transitioned to more lifestyle and believe so strongly about it, to the point where I cut down, and I just recently stopped completely from the hospital just to dedicate my time to helping people reverse their diseases. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's kind of interesting. It's funny. I see a lot of people. They kind of put their toe in the water. They start looking into lifestyle. They may have their own personal experience, and then they start seeing it happen in their patients, and they're like, I'm not having as much fun doing the standard stuff where everybody has complications and no one gets better, and it's hard to stay in that system. So I applaud
Uh,
you for
Thank you.
making a transition. That's got to be awesome. So let me ask you. I mean, just with that, uh, are you enjoying it more? I mean,
I love it. It's not work anymore. It's like I wake up excited. Who's no longer gonna talk to you today? It's just really, I feel like I'm making friends with people and clients and patients, and then they understand it. And I don't have that kind of relationship that I was in the hospital. I felt like I was going with the motions, feeling like I say stuff I don't believe in and telling them things I don't think it's gonna work. And now I see people week after week, and they're just completely transforming before me. And it's so much, it's fun. Every time it's exciting for me, as if it's the first time. So I love it.
yeah, and I think a lot of people kind of view physicians. They say, well, these physicians, they're highly trained and they make a lot of money and they shouldn't have anything to complain about. But I mean, you should like what you do, and when you go to work and it's the same old, it's kind of it becomes drudgery, where it's just like, I'm just going to take care of people that never really get better. I mean, I know you've seen, the bounce backs, the patients that just keep coming in time after, you get the regulars in the hospital, the guy that comes in every 3
Exactly.
months
Yeah.
with cellulitis or whatever it is, and you just like, what could you do? And now you have this, kind of a sense of you've seen success, and it's got to be much more enjoyable. Let me ask you about, as a nephrologist, training in nephrology, obviously, a little bit about the kidney, right? So we hear a lot of, I see a lot of concerns around people eating protein and meat, and it's going to destroy your kidneys. And there's even in the medical profession, it's still
Yeah.
pretty commonly a widely held view. What are your thoughts around those things?
So people confuse being on dialysis and having kidney problems. So when you're on dialysis, you don't have a functioning kidneys. So you have to worry about protein in those instances because you can't handle it. But most people with any functioning kidneys, there's really no harm, and there's no data for that one. And actually, people improve. I have people with diabetes who have protein leaking in the urine, and then once they reverse the diabetes, eating a ton of protein, actually protein goes away and the kidney function improves. And we see that, and there's data that the kidney function does improve. So there's a lot of bad information, unfortunately, and people get scared. They don't want to harm themselves. And I keep getting the same questions on social media. And that's why I'm getting a little bit more kind of in your face, blunt, uh, just to get the message across that there's really no harm eating real food.
Yeah, that's an important statement. And, because we've often heard, some people when they say, well, in healthy kidneys, protein may not be a problem, but if you have chronic renal insufficiency, you've got to limit your protein. And what you're saying, and what I've seen, and I've seen the studies that show that actually higher protein diets actually improve GFR and improve kidney function.
Yeah.
Um,
I
are
think the
you
only time you have to worry about stage five, and there's five stages where, mild, or moderate to severe, but really until you're stage five and nearing dialysis, you shouldn't even have to worry about it.
What I often talk about this measure, cystatin C. I mean, as you know, most creatinine-based serum creatinine-based estimates,
Right.
estimated GFRs are just at their estimates, and it may not represent what's actually going on. And I often steer people towards a cystatin C, but that's still an estimate. I mean, how if you have somebody that's on a high protein diet, a carnivore diet, and they start to see their creatinine go up, their BUN's up, their GFR's down, is that automatically, do you say, hey, your kidneys are failing, or how do you deal with that?
It's over time monitoring, and there's not just the creatinine. Then you look at the phosphorus level, you look at how much acid, the potassium, really, and how they feel, and any swelling and blood pressure. So there's no one thing. You kind of look at the whole picture. It's like people telling me, "Hey, my morning glucose is 105. Is that bad?" It's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like so many different things that may be a good thing or bad thing. So for kidney function, you really have to monitor it over time. You do have to be careful, look at medications, over the counter, and all that stuff. But generally, the food alone, I haven't seen it yet make it worse if they're actually getting healthier. So
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this because, and there's a number of people, not a lot, but there's a few that seem to, in my view, get it a little bit. You said, my glucose is 105. Now, some people would be alarmed by that, and they say, oh my gosh, it's in this sort of pre-diabetic range
right,
potentially. But at the same time, you might see that occurring. But at the same time, the people are getting leaner, they're losing body fat, they're feeling better, and they're like, I'm worried about this particular lab marker because it's been associated with diabetes.
yeah,
And my thoughts are, I still think it all depends a little bit. Now, if it's 200, then it's a different story. But
right.
going from 88 to 105, and you're seeing improvements in body composition, is that a problem? I don't know. I don't know that it is. I mean, are you?
It's a
What are your thoughts?
snapshot. I tell them I don't know the answer because what's your insulin level, or what's your ketones? If you're in deep ketosis and your glucose 105, it's actually physiologic at that point, or like stressed out in the morning or something. That DOM phenomenon, when you see people wearing CGM, you see that little bit rise in the morning and dips down. So there's really a lot of things working simultaneously to know if this is a good thing or not is such a good thing.
So, are you still in Houston, Texas?
Yeah.
Okay. And so tell me what how did the transition to go from full-time hospitalist to now, I guess, not in the hospital? How did that go? How did people around you react to that? Did your family have any concerns?
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
going on with that?
Uh, Everybody has doubts. I had doubts. I was worried. I mean, to be honest, it's a nice paycheck when you're working in the hospital. So you work a lot, but you get paid well. But when you reach a point, you're just not sitting right with you. You have to make a move. And I think I just started when I had my first interview with you in September 2020. That was just literally the beginning of me. So I had that idea, but I was too scared to do anything. So as things evolved, I started cutting down on hospital medicine and just kind of split my time. Uh, my family were worried, like, you did all this. Are you sure? I mean, I'm in a leadership position in the hospital. I could have been like a leader of the group, or I was associate director. So I had to take it very seriously. And people, are you sure? Doubted me. You have a bright future, and it didn't feel right. And then I had to pull the plug. So I turned in my notice in November. And this way, I was like, I have no way but to make it work. And I've never felt happier after that. My parents to this day, they still, are you sure? Are you okay? Are you are you making enough? It's like, don't worry, it's gonna be fine. And that's what I do. I mean, people now believe in me more. They see the results, they see people, and social media. I mean, I'm not after numbers, but in the past year and a half, I grew it plenty that people are seeking me out, just reaching out and signing up and all that stuff. So, and they see results.
Yeah, and I would say you still have a bright future. It may not be practicing hospital medicine, but I mean, there's a tremendous potential opportunity there. And I think what you're doing, and what we're doing here, and other physicians, this is going to be the standard, I think. And I think the other people are going to be considered dinosaurs, the ones that are still handing out the pills all the time. And I
Absolutely.
mean, I think I think we have to call them out, and you start sort of kind of making fun of them and say, "Well, you're still practicing that old goofy, symptomatic management medicine." And I think that's how we have to do. We have to be very in your face. And I'm glad to see it. So it's a similar, like, you're probably familiar with Trochel Asian. He was in a similar situation. He was a hospitalist. I think he's in New York, and he finally just withdrew and started his own practice. He's
Yeah.
completely devoid of that, and those opportunities are there. So that's really, really good. So, um, and I haven't. I guess I should. I know I follow you on Twitter, but I got maybe I got to go on your Instagram and find you there. But
Yeah.
uh,
Sometimes you like my stuff. I wasn't sure if you were
oh
following, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot. It's obviously there's a lot of stuff going on in social media. You can't
No,
keep.
I know it's crazy. You gotta, limit yourself sometimes.
It can turn into a full
But
time.
I love what you also did with Revero and that whole transition.
Yeah, and
It's
we're very excited about that, and we will very shortly be expanding out and having physicians throughout the country, and it's going to be. I'm really excited about it. We just got some significant venture uh, endorsements. So several venture capital firms have now lined up behind us, so that's going to help us propel pretty nicely. So that's relatively new
it
news.
is the future.
I think it is. I think it
Yeah,
is. I think the future of healthcare. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback and
absolutely.
screaming and yelling. But I think that's what people understand is we're tired of being sick. What are the things you're treating now? Now you're not just treating kidney disease anymore, right? You're focused.
No, yeah. My passion is really metabolic diseases, obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, high blood pressure kind of get lumped into it, and fatty liver disease. So my focus has been really taking people in their miserable, kind of desperate state after they've tried so many things, and then walk them in a journey over several months of changing their lifestyle and habits and watching their markers dramatically and their symptoms improve, and hoping that they can just be on their own and really lead a healthy lifestyle. So I look for the sickest in a way, or the ones that feel the worst. Obesity and diabetes is my primary focus. But I've gotten people ask me about cholesterol so much that I'm tired of it. But it's not my. I don't like cholesterol because people fixate on it. They have a million problems and they just want to ask about the cholesterol number. But then hypertension, I take people off medications all the time. It's inevitable. Like I have a guy 2 weeks in after 10 years of blood pressure medicine, he has to stop it, or it's just dropping. When you see it's improved so quickly, you kind of get mad at the system because it didn't have to be that complicated. Same with diabetes. So yeah, that's my focus right now: diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure.
Yeah, and you can imagine the frustration that the patient shares. I mean, they've been on these meds for 10 years, and they're like, "Hey, man, if I just made a little few dietary changes, maybe worked on a few lifestyle things, I'd be off these meds, and the physicians, you were trained on that. I
Yeah,
wasn't. We didn't get lectures on how to get people off meds.
no,
It wasn't part of the deal. And are you? So let me ask you that with regard to that, with deprescription, because that's a term many physicians don't
yeah.
even be familiar with. But you're taking people off meds, I imagine, pretty frequently. Do you find? Are there any like medications that you're I mean, for the average person that goes on a diet like they're diabetic, they may just say, "Hey, I'm gonna drop my sulfonylurea or my insulin."
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any concerns about dropping certain medications?
I have a concern continuing certain medication when they switch their diet because sulfonylurea are the worst in terms of keeping them on. I kind of have to stop them immediately because they kind of squeeze the insulin out of your pancreas. So you run into problems with hypoglycemia, low glucose. So there's certain drugs you kind of have to take them off the bat and then just monitor and tolerate a little bit unstable numbers until you get there. That's the monitoring part. But I don't worry about stopping anything. My goal is always to kind of get rid of all medications. The one surprising one, a lot of people come in and they have a severe GERD, acid reflux, and 100% of them recover and also come off these drugs as well. So I monitor closely, get them off quickly, a lot of these medications.
What are just with regard to usually it's a proton pump inhibitors for GERD. Are there problems with those medications long term? Many people, it's supposed to be you're supposed to put them on for 2 weeks, but many people are on them for decades. It seems.
Yeah. Well, I've seen back in when I was in the hospital or nephrology, you see severe magnesium deficiency with proton pump inhibitors. You see a kidney, interstitial kidney disease. You can kind of get chronic kidney disease. You get C. diff, Clostridium difficile infections, complications that increase that risk. Even conventional medicine now, they're moving away from them a little bit. So, and how are you gonna digest protein in a non-acidic stomach? It just doesn't, and that's why people can't handle a lot of times meat because they don't have the right environment for it. So
Yes, one of the things I can remember, learning when I was learning how to be a surgeon and doing admission orders. We would just automatically put people on PPIs. It was just
yeah,
like
stress
automatic.
prophylaxis.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was just you didn't even think about it. And now I think about these things today. I'm like, why did we do that? I understand the rationale, but it's at the end of the day, you're probably hurting people. Um, do you? So, well, what do you do? How are you getting people healthy? What are you doing? Are you putting them on a vegan diet? What are you doing with this stuff?
they know my biases. They know I'm kind of carnivore-ish, but like I eat certain vegetables, but I don't force any lifestyle on them. Actually worked with one vegan person and a couple of vegetarian. So I try not to force my belief system if they're doing it out of belief. But if they're doing it out of thinking they're healthy, I try to present them with some more objective information. But really, I start where they are, what they're willing to do, and I keep telling people you get healthy by what you stop eating, not what you add initially. So you can eat all the steaks in the world, but if you're still eating junk, you're going to be sick. So stopping sugar and seed oils and all that stuff has been the biggest drastic. And then automatically they have to eat something else. And usually I support animal protein based, whatever vegetable if they want to eat them, and then I don't call it keto, carnivore. Some people have to swing all the way to carnivore if they have gut issues, autoimmune diseases. And then after a month or two, they kind of find their own balance of lifestyle. That's I tell them it doesn't matter really. I'm not dogmatic about it. So whatever works for you is fine.
How quickly do you see, I know you kind of alluded to this, but how quickly can someone expect to see improvements in blood glucose, improvements in hypertension, improvements, weight loss? How quickly do people typically see some of those things?
I haven't seen a single person not benefiting as quickly as a week or two. They almost have different degrees. I have a guy drop 7 pounds in 1 week, but he was so inflamed that happens. His blood pressure dropped 20 points, and I quickly took him off the medicine. Right away. Glucose, it depends how long they've had diabetes for. I have people instantly within a week kind of start stopping medicine. Some people took a little longer. I have as long as 17 years of diabetes and insulin that I eventually took them off, all the stuff. It varies. Blood pressure tends to be the slowest if they had it for a long time, but eventually everything improves. But in a matter of weeks and months, almost everybody narrows down to kind of nothing or a pill or two. Metformin, I usually is the last one I take off. Kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah, and so that's interesting that you can make these changes within, a matter of weeks. And we went through this pandemic where this thing was, well, that's a chronic problem. We can't address that. It takes years to,
Yeah,
and it's not the case. And so I think we lost an opportunity to address those things, or at least talk about it. We didn't even talk about that.
it's too bad. It's really too bad.
Yeah. I mean, did you, well, let me ask you. So I know you're in Houston, Texas. Where's the best place to get barbecue in Houston right now?
Well, there's Killins in Pearland is my favorite. I know you've been to Houston.
I used to live there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I trained at UTMB in Galveston, and then
yeah, yeah.
my sister and mother are in Spring, Texas, which is, right adjacent to Houston.
Right, right.
I lived in Texas for 20 years. And so
If you ever visit, you make a trip to Pearland, go to Killins. They have multiple locations, different types of food concept, but the barbecue there is outstanding.
I was I was not I grew up in Lake Jackson, which is not too far from Carolina.
Right.
And I remember when I worked at UPS loading trucks in Angleton, Texas. One of the guys was from Carolina. I've driven through Carolina before, but it's been many, many years. So maybe I'll have to make a return trip to try that out. Um, did you, when you were still actively in the hospital? I mean, I know it's tough to implement lifestyle and dietary changes for somebody who's acutely hospitalized. Is that something that you were able to at least try to talk to people about, and how was that received?
Yeah, actually, it's how it started. And I have the luxury as a hospitalist, you have these 12-hour shift in the panel of patients. So it's not like a 10-minute visit. So I can spend 2 minutes, I can spend an hour with a patient. So I've always, when I kind of believe in the system, I went back to these patients and tried to talk to them. So I definitely did that a lot. Now, how many of them stuck to it or believed it, I had no way to tell. But one particular one was the pivotal inflection point for me. Is I had this lady with severe fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic, and she showed up in the hospital with jaundice and confusion and really liver failure. And that's how it started. So at that time I was just like really been gung ho about fructose and fasting and all that stuff. So I told her husband they didn't want a transplant. They're getting worked up for liver transplant, and that's a big center for that. So I told him, but if you want to avoid it, there's one thing you can do: stop eating sugar no matter what. Minimize carbohydrates and as much as possible fast, and a lot of these things will improve. I could tell they wanted it so bad. So I kept their name on the side and I had a week with them. And then she was really sick. 3 months later, I check in, I emailed the husband. She's not on a transplant list. Her liver is like almost, you can't tell there was anything wrong with it and lost so much weight active. So I knew the power of influence and word, and the system would have had her on liver transplant and immunosuppression medicine. So I did influence people that way. COVID, I took care of a lot of COVID patients. When it first happened, I was still in the hospital. Also, all of them are diabetes or obesity. They end up in the ICU and a lot of them dying. So a lot of times too, they were open to influence. So they took it to heart too. So
Yeah, let me just ask you, because I just interviewed Dr. Steve James from the UK, and he was a cardiac anesthesiologist, and he spent a lot of time in what they call the ITUs there, taking care of COVID patients. And what he told me was he didn't see any lean, athletic, healthy people in there. They were all obese. Does that reflect your experience from what you saw?
100%. And people who they were labeled as healthy, for the trained eye, they have visceral fat. I mean, they don't have to look obese, but they have this beer belly type thing. And you can tell from some markers and the general weight that they're not metabolically healthy despite not having a medical diagnosis. I haven't seen, unless they're old, I haven't seen anyone that looked healthy, no matter what age they were in the hospital. So
Yeah, and if you listen to the news, it was like there's these super athletes are all dying of it. And I just, again, and as you know, you've been practicing medicine for enough years that you know the people that get sick are the people that are unhealthy. I mean, that have unhealthy behaviors and lifestyles, and struggle with obesity and metabolic disease, and that's, it doesn't matter whether it's heart disease or infectious disease. The outcomes are always
Absolutely.
worse, and these are the people that always get sick. And so, yeah, once again, I'll echo that we missed the boat on trying to change that, and hopefully going forward we'll be able to do
Yeah,
that.
but and people are waking up. Like the patients are right now, I didn't want them to be skeptical and not trust their doctors, but they reached that point where they have 5 minutes and they walk out with prescriptions. So they're starting to ask questions, they're looking for answers, and they're finding us. And there's not enough of us out there. So I think people are waking up to it. So,
Yeah, I think there will be. I think over the next 5-10 years, there'll be a lot of physicians and a lot of pushback against what is considered the standard of care now, but which is not very good in many cases. Are there any things you miss about being a hospitalist or being in a hospital, or something that you, because people ask me if I miss surgery. And yeah, I mean, it was cool. I like doing it. But at the same point, I enjoy so much more what I do now. But is there anything
right.
you're like, well, I wish I could go back and do hospital work?
Uh, Not well. I miss my colleagues. Miss the personal interaction and talking to nurses and all these people. And I miss that part because I'm remote, so all my communication has been phone and video and conference and things like that. So I miss that part. There's an adrenaline rush to being in the hospital, and you kind of get a kind of a little bit addicted to that kind of being in that position to help. And so there's some missing there, but I know I'm not going to go back. I mean, if I do shift, it's just to help my friends. I kept my credentials just in case, but other than that, I think I'm happy I did it. I would do it again. This is the next phase, and I hope my some of my colleagues start doing more of that stuff themselves.
So you're doing everything telemed, virtual, remote care. Are you seeing multiple states, or is it mostly Texas, just Texas right now?
So I'm seeing multiple. I have people from in Australia and Europe and in different places, Canada. So when with those people, I play coach because I'm not gonna change the medication, but I try to guide them how to do it with the doctors. I try to get some licenses in other states. I have gotten California and Washington State. My brother lived there, so I went to Seattle recently. I figured just to have some extra things. But people, a lot of Texas and California people, Florida, different states, they're just, and they understand. They just want to eat better. And it's 90% really about the food. So I feel pretty confident, just, help coach them about the diet. And there are other ways to deal with medication if I can't directly manage them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar. I still do a little bit of lifestyle consulting, and I have a lot of fun. And I see people from all around the world, and it's really nice to just to still get that one-on-one interaction.
I
Um,
love it. It's my favorite still. I
yeah,
did some group. I like groups, but I don't want to miss that one-on-one relationship with people. And
yeah,
it's
I totally get that, and I enjoy that. Well, I mean, this is one of the things we're seeing. And COVID showed some of this. We went to a lot of remote care. A lot of physicians were granted licenses in other states on a temporary basis because of this emergency, and and so I think going forward, we're probably going to see more of that, not less. I remember when I did my residency, we as an orthopedic surgeon, we were doing a remote care, which I thought was kind of comical because we were trying to diagnose ACL tears on the
yeah.
computer, and it was just like it was, and we did that primarily with the Texas Department of Corrections, the TDC. I don't know if you trained. I don't know if you got any TDC with Baylor, but we did at UTMB. In fact, we had our own prison hospital. They would bring them down, but occasionally, well, most of the time they didn't want to bring them down because of the security and the cost. And so we would, we'd be on they'd be on a remote TV monitor. And we're trying to do an orthopedic exam, like,
Wow. That's
telling
yeah.
telling the nurse to move his leg this way, and it never worked well. And we would get people in we'd think would have a problem. We'd sign them up for the operating room. They'd show up. We'd examine them, like, oh, you don't actually have what we thought you did. And so there's some definite limitations there. But are you, well, I mean, if you're just doing the coaching stuff, do you see, um, well, let me ask you, because you're still saying you're still doing stuff where you're licensed. What about some of this remote biomarker feedback stuff? Glucose monitors, CGM, scales, blood pressure cuffs. Are you playing with any of that technology?
So with CGM, yes, people who are interested in it, or every person with diabetes, I give them a CGM. I do this whatever is affordable, usually the Freestyle Libre, and I connect it and I see their stuff remotely. I haven't gotten fancy with the other stuff because I have a shared sheet where they log their stuff. So all I need is a blood pressure measurement. So they log their stuff, they log their weight and waist measurement. I'd use waist a lot because it's a good surrogate for the waist to height ratio. That works a lot. Speaking of physical exam, I just asked them the question that I would want to look: skin tags, discoloration, swelling in the legs, things like that. Fungus in the nail. And so I kind of have an indirect way to examine them by just asking them to look on them. But yeah, biomarkers, I order blood work. These days anybody can order their own blood work. Direct to consumer is cheaper. Everybody tells me it's cheaper than going through insurance anyway. So there are workarounds in all these things for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And I think there may be one or two states that don't allow you to order your own blood
That's
test.
right.
But
Yeah.
I think maybe Pennsylvania or something like
New
that. But I think
York or something.
mostly people can do that and it can be very cheap. And in fact, I ran into a company called Merrick Health. I mean, the CBC is $4. I
Oh,
mean, it's like ridiculous. It's dirt cheap.
yeah.
So
I use a walk-in lab. You get an option to pick Quest or LabCorp, and things are not expensive at all. I mean, yeah, I get a CBC and CMP combined for like 20-30 bucks, and insulin level is like $20-25. It's not cost prohibitive to know these things because they all complain that doctors refuse to order insulin or any blood test would be nice to have.
and people ask me about that. Why is my doctor refusing to order insulin? A lot of times, they have to get it pre-authorized, and it's like you have to fight with an insurance company and stand on the phone for half an
Right,
hour
right.
to get a test that you want. And so it's not always a physician not wanting to do that, but it's just the reality of the system. And so if you can go around that, you can get this information. Are you using insulin, for instance, fasting insulins for?
Yeah, I use it as really one of the basic stuff that because it's a number when it's abnormal. Unfortunately, the normal range is really wrong. And it's part of the problem. I think a lot of doctors may not even know what that number is. So you may get a number of 12 and it kind of completely unflagged and looks good. And when it's really high. So, but I use insulin level on everybody who's willing to do blood work because it kind of gives you a baseline and you can something to monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on which lab you're looking at, they've seen fasting insulin up normal up to like 19, which,
Yep, 19. Yes,
yeah, it's like, wait a minute. And, it's
ridiculous.
like, why don't we talk about under 5 or 3 or something like that, which would be
Yeah,
probably more.
I am for 4 or less in ideal world,
Yeah.
but even the liver numbers. I don't know if you've seen the AST, ALT. That average normal numbers keep shifting now, and then in the 40s when it's still normal, and normal should be like in the teens at this point.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen some different numbers, and I think it's just, I think these are normal numbers for sick people, right? And we just that's what
Yeah,
our that's what our
it is average. Yes, it
a lot
is
of
the
our
average.
reference ranges were determined on perhaps not really particularly healthy people, and so we have to contend with that. Speaking of, so yeah, fatty liver. I mean, this is something that um, is obviously becoming ubiquitous. I mean, we see it now, and gosh, I don't know how many people you see it in. Is that something you find is easily reversible?
I think it's the quickest to reverse. The fatty liver, I mean, that's the most toxic kind of fat, and the body eliminates it first. So I've seen people not move much in the weight, 1 or 2 pounds, and have their waist shrink and everything improves. So I think unless you develop cirrhosis, it's never too late, and there are easy images and things like that to look at. I mean, when I was at the hospital, we were a transplant center in the 9 years, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease became the number one reason for liver transplant. So it's good for the transplant center. It's terrible for the patient, and it could be reversed. So I get mad, but
Yeah, you don't particularly want a liver transplant. And I remember the early days when they were just a bloodbath. I mean, they were going through, they're breaking the blood bank doing a liver transplant, going through
oh
20
yeah, yeah,
units of blood.
yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
crazy.
they've gotten better with that now, but it's still, I mean, if you can just, a simple dietary change prevents you from, lifelong immunosuppressive drugs, a huge surgery, someone else's organ. Yeah, goodness gracious, we have that sort of stuff. Um, you know, when we look at the U.S. healthcare, $3.5 trillion or something we spend on direct medical care, and the majority of it is chronic disease. How much of that do you think we could avoid just by educating physicians on how to treat people's lifestyle?
I think most of it, even without avoiding anything, we already waste so much on unnecessary tests. I sent a tweet recently about, I mean, something around 40, 50% of healthcare dollars are either going to fraud or inappropriate testing. And I knew that in the hospital, somebody comes in with a little dizziness, they just order everything. So there's a lot of money that can be saved without changing the standard of care, just practicing common sense. But even if we implement lifestyle, I think. I think the healthcare system will collapse in a good way, because there's not going to be a need for all these hospitals and crazy stuff. So I think this whole industry would collapse if people get healthier. So in a way, not my problem, but I want people to be healthy. So
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you get in there and you come in for whatever complaint, and there's this standard battery of, you know, $3,000 worth of lab testing, which again, much of it is unnecessary. Some of that is directed at kind of CYA,
yeah,
avoid lawsuits.
yeah,
Why
yeah.
don't you test this? And it's like, well, they didn't really have an indication. Well, you can see where that's a problem with some of that stuff, and so some people are doing this just out of reflexes. I don't know if it's still the practice, but I know when I was in medical school and during my residency, it was like, you would round on internal medicine, and every day there was a bunch of labs everybody ordered. It was like every single day you're running labs over and
Yeah.
over again. And it was just like, why are we doing that?
It's still present, but there is a big push. When I was at the hospital, I was also involved in quality and utilization of resources. So there's a big push to stop doing these mindless daily labs, daily whatever, and daily X-rays. So there is a big push, and you kind of protect it in the hospital system, So
Do you what so how are you imp- so the lifestyle, it's nice to know what works, and you get some people to do that, but the problem, one of the biggest problem is, how do you get people to actually implement it? What are you using? How are you motivating people, or how are you providing feedback? How do you get people to stick to the plan?
it's really about the hand holding in a way that I meet with them every single week, even for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Accountability, just initially just do it until they get to the other side of feeling amazing. And once they do, they don't want to go back. And when they do mess up, they feel horrible, and then they get back on track. So it's really a lot of messing up less frequently, developing these habits, me being there for them to see the end of it. That's why I don't do these one-time consults, because I think most people know what they should do, but until they go through it and make mistakes, and so I think that's how I do it. It's really do the hard work and seeing the results of their labor.
Yeah, and that's something, as physicians, we just don't have the opportunity to. If you're working in a hospital, if you're working even in a clinic, you're just not going to be able to provide that
No,
level of support that's needed. And you really can't send them anywhere.
no.
It's going to get that. I mean, what we're building with our company is going to be all about that sort of stuff. So it's going to be at least a
I'm
nice.
very excited. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. We're not really trained to hold hands in a way. I mean, there's people that have good bedside manner and they can sit there and hold hands during the hospital and cry with them and whatever, laugh with them.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's different than sitting there and doing the hard work.
I text them, I joke with them, I send them steak picture. I mean, I become kind of this kind of back and forth relationship. They feel comfortable, like, to tell me what's wrong, and they talk a lot of personal stuff with me too, and which is a huge deal. A lot of the emotional eating is plays a big role there, and it's a privilege, really. I have this doctor-patient relationship that they feel safe, and I can really talk about all the issues. So,
Yeah, and it's kind of fun because you get to know these folks more than
yeah,
just a name on a chart, and and a disease. Because a lot of times it's like, well, I'm going to take care of the patient with fatty liver disease in room one, and then here's another person that's got hypertension in room two, and it's just a disease and not a
yeah,
person.
to freaking organs, yeah.
Right, exactly, and so we've gotten away from that. Now, I think the nice thing about internal medicine, and, I was obviously specialized in orthopedics, so I didn't see it, but you do get a holistic view of kind of everything. You're kinda like you're kinda like the generalist that, I mean, obviously, you specialize in nephrology, but you have that ability to kinda synthesize and integrate all the
Right.
stuff where a specialist, like, particularly like the cardiologist, they don't care if you get dementia. I mean, it's not, they're not worried about that. They're just worried about whether you got a heart attack or not. So you see this myopic focus on the one thing, of course, the heart.
Even nephrology was more you have to look at it holistic because blood pressure and fluid and heart and all that stuff. So I think I was drawn to the whole big picture from the beginning. I never liked to focus too much, and that was my issue as a hospitalist. When I consult people, they just see an organ, they don't see the whole person, and they end up doing things on people who are going to die anyway. I mean, there's just so many different things I have issues with, but that kind of led with my personality to kind of also seek this.
Yeah, you would often see battles between the different specialties where, the nephrologists were convinced that the infectious disease guys were out to assassinate their patients, give them vancomycin. Or what, it was this
Yeah,
kind of
right.
like,
There's always a battle, and you're like this
right,
quarterback trying to manage.
yeah, who's doing good, and everybody had their own organ they're gonna protect.
Yeah.
Um, do you, as far as, like I said, are you finding that, with the people, what has been some of the best advice you give people as far as, you know, initially starting off? Like you said, you meet them where they are. Is there kind of like a, let's eliminate the sugar and the grain and the seed oils? I mean, what is the concern about the seed oil? Is it that specifically, or is it because it's so often found in processed junk food?
Both. I mean, a lot of it is because it's processed food related, but also the high. I mean, first, it's unnatural. You have the way it's made. It just that alone makes me not even want to touch it. It's the inflammation that's caused. I mean, see, all this. It's been known. I mean, the high amount of omega 6 and the instability of these oils, they really cause a lot of inflammation and lead and contribute to insulin resistance, and your cells are their omega 3 ratio. I mean, it gets replaced by this unhealthy proportion of seed oils and really leads to diseases. Now, you get attacked all the time, like it's crazy. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, people are getting healthier, so I do focus on that. Sugar, eliminating the processed food initially, and really to tell people to keep it simple. The key is keep it simple because they come so confused. There's so many conflicting data. I told them, look, what I tell you, you're going to find something opposite. What they tell you, every study they have an opposing study. At some point, you just have to pick a way to do things, and then if it doesn't work, you change. If it does, great, do more of it. And they like the keep it simple, not too simple approach, and just start somewhere. Let's go. And then 6 weeks is a long time, so they become very different people at the end of it.
Let me, and because this is something. I mean, I guess we can't do enough education around this because it just continues to go up, and there are some deeply held beliefs in medicine, in the populace, that you try to say there's nuance here, but cholesterol is an issue. I mean, it's something that you may go on a low carb diet, a carnivore diet, a ketogenic diet, and in a certain percentage of the population, we do see an increase in LDL cholesterol, and it's very
Yeah.
concerning to people. I think, when we look at the risk factors for cardiovascular disease, I don't know that that's the main thing that's out there. I think diabetes is by far a bigger concern. But how do you broach that issue when it comes up?
Yeah, generally tell them, look, we all know the odds ratio when you compare LDL and diabetes and obesity. I mean, diabetes blows it out of the water. I mean, the LDL odds ratio relative risk increase is so small that you shouldn't even look at it from an observational study standpoint because it doesn't even hit that mark. But we continue to fixate on it. And I tell them, I use common sense. It's like, okay, your body makes most of the cholesterol, every cell, every hormone, everything. Why would nature be so stupid to make something that's going to kill us? I think, but if you damage the cholesterol, maybe it becomes part of the problem. So let's address what's damaging the cholesterol, not lowering a number that doesn't, it just makes it look pretty. That's all. You're not any healthier, and everybody gets side effects from it. So I approach it from that angle, and I tell them, look, everybody's going to be put on the stat and everybody's going to disagree with me, and you got to make your own decision. I never tell them you should or should not take it. I tell them, look, this is, you're not going to live longer. You're not going to prevent really major events unless you've had severe disease, and you may have a small percentage. So you make your own call. A lot of people choose to stop it, and some people take it and actually develop side effects. I have a patient had her sugar just double. I mean, just being on statin. So it's not a benign drug. You're blocking something your body wants. I tell them LDL is not the cause of heart disease, no matter what everybody else says. It can play a role when it's damaged, but it's really about chronic inflammation. Even cardiologists know this. It's about chronic inflammation. And I think LDL is part of the trying to heal things, not trying to damage things. It's just you see it at the site of the fire, so you blame the firefighter for the fire. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, there are people who would vehemently disagree with you, and they would
Right.
point to Mendelian randomization studies and and other mechanistic type of stuff. But at the same time, if you look at, I mean, just all cause mortality data, and we see that, I mean, there's a study out of Korea from 2018, 2019. It was 12.8 million people, and I mean, they basically saw the lowest all cause mortality was total cholesterol between 210 and 250, which is, I mean, that would give most cardiologists chest pain, to think about.
Yeah.
They'd be screaming at you if your LDL is above, or your total is above 210. So it's interesting to see how that.
Yeah. I tell them it's about what the breakdown. I mean, triglyceride and HDL are way more important in the setting of, visceral fat and insulin level. You got to look at the whole picture. You can't just look at the LDL alone.
Yeah, I agree with the whole looking at the whole picture definitely makes a difference. Are you getting a lot of negative? I mean, for all that good you're doing, and like I said, I sit there, I'm like, I'm getting people off medications, they're getting healthier, and but you're still getting at least I get attacked all the time, and maybe because of my personality, and I bring it on me because I'm very in your face in many ways. But are you getting some pushback, some negative pushback?
Recently, I'm starting to notice I'm getting more attacks. But when I look at their profile, it kind of makes sense a lot of times. Dietitians, people who are obsessed. Like I talk about type 2 diabetes, and you have the type 1 attacking you because, I'm being horrible. And people make blanket statement like I'm harming my patients or on any of that without having any experience or knowing who I am, or they don't follow me. So attacks, it means I'm doing something right. If I'm pleasing everybody, I think then I'm not doing the right thing. So I ignore most of the time. If something respectful, I may respond, but generally I just kind of, I'm not here to convince people as like, this is what I do, this is what's working. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes, like, if somebody's got like Earthling so and so in their name, then I know what
yeah,
their
it's like numbers and,
biases. Yeah,
and
yeah.
flags next to the name and pronouns and all that stuff. So I don't know who they are. Like you just kind of want to attack me.
One of the interesting, because you mentioned type 1 diabetics being, and as you know, most endocrinologists are still of the sort of the opinion that, eating a healthy amount of carbohydrates, a lot of carbohydrates, and is chasing it constantly with insulin. And yet there is, I mean, if you look at Dr. Richard Bernstein, who's got
Yeah.
tremendously good results with a very low carb approach among his type 1 diabetics, including kids. Um, what is the concern people are complaining about with type 1 diabetics and treating them with carbohydrate restriction?
I think they worry about hypoglycemia, low glucose, and same thing with type 2 diabetes. So there, people are confusing two things. One, diabetes control, which studies show that if you try too hard to control, it's a negative thing. Versus, I tell them this is not about diabetes control. This is about not having diabetes to begin with. So would you rather have a diabetes that is controlled or not having diabetes? So it's apples and oranges. And that's where people think controlling, bringing the A1C too low is dangerous, or you're risking a heart attack, stroke, or coma or something like that. But they don't get it that this is not diabetes anymore. Versus taking 7 drugs to get your A1C down to 6, completely different. I don't know. I think it's just also old dogma, old teaching that diabetics have to have carbs. Type 1 diabetic, you have to give carbs and insulin, all that stuff. But a lot of people who have type 1 have done that. And now they're very strong advocates of low carbohydrate diet. And they've been using very minimal amount of insulin.
Yeah, that's the point you made about control, there was the Accord study that was done several years ago, and they looked at aggressive control and
Right.
lowering the hemoglobin A1C via medications, and the outcomes are actually worse. The cardiovascular disease outcomes were worse in those patients than the
Yeah.
ones that weren't so aggressively controlled. And so it's kind of one of those things where how you do it is just as important as what the result is, I think, in many cases. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, do you find, and the hypoglycemia thing, this is another interesting thing that I have seen, shared with me anecdotally by many, many, many type 1s and type 2s, is, if they're eating adequate fat, restricting carbohydrates, and particularly if they're going to ketosis, they don't become symptomatically hypoglycemic because, it's like it's there's a buffer there and you've
There's
got
a
the
buffer.
energy, right?
Yeah.
What is the concern? So let's, because for people that aren't familiar, what is the concern with hypoglycemia? What is it? How does it present? And why are we concerned about it?
Glucose is mandatory. Like you have to have certain number of glucose, and there's some cellular functions like hemoglobin and some brain function that absolutely must have glucose for mitochondrial function and energy function. But most other cells they run on carbs, but they can switch fuel completely to fat. So people who are adapted, so and then they run a lower glucose, they can be fine because that's just enough to run what's necessary, and everything else is running on fat. You can die, you can go in a coma. It's really dangerous to have hypoglycemia, especially symptomatic one. People will feel sweaty, lightheaded. The worst one is it happens in your sleep. People get a big dose of insulin, they don't eat or do something, and then something happens in the middle of the night, brain damage, things like that. So definitely life threatening. I'd rather people run a little higher early on rather than running too low. That's why taking off medications. But nobody's going to run low without drugs that push it down. So that's why the one that lowers it quickly, I take him out, take him off first.
Yeah, sulfonylureas and
Right.
obviously insulin are probably the two biggest ones that most people are aware of. Um, I have seen, like I said, within this community, there are some people on the carnivore diet. They're not diabetics, and they eat in a way, and they're routinely see blood glucose in the 50s,
Yeah.
sometimes even the high 40s, and they're totally fine. They're not having any hypoglycemic symptoms. And if you were to present to a hospital with a blood glucose of 48, they would hook you up to an IV and start
Yeah.
pumping dextrose in you, right? I mean, but 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 because our brain is being, like you mentioned, the brain and the testes and the red blood cells and the renal medulla are all, glucose dependent, but you have enough to run those things and the ketones can take care of the rest.
Yeah.
So it's a different situation. You may be familiar with, uh, oh, I'm blanking on the name now, but anyway, they did studies in the 60s, 70s where they basically did prolonged starvation studies,
Mhm.
basically, and got people there where their blood glucose was 40, and then they gave them insulin on top of that, and they got it down to 20, and they were
They're
still
still, yeah, I
still
remember reading that.
conversing. So it's kind of interesting how little we actually need of glucose. But you're correct. I mean, I've seen my blood glucose in the 50s, and I've been totally fine. I've been working out. I've been working out my blood glucose at 57, and I'm totally fine with that. So it's interesting to see that. Um, what was I going to say here? Oh, we're getting close on time. So I want to just give you an opportunity to share your stuff, where you're located, how patients can get a hold of you, how people that want to get coaching support, any plans you have for the future.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Elie Jarrouge MD, and I'm on Instagram, Eli_Jarrouge. I not fancy. I usually kind of crop my tweet and elaborate, and people have been loving my caption and elaboration on that and some common sense. I post some pictures. My website is metabolichealthmd.com. I have some information about myself, my programs. I do talk to everybody before they sign up with me because I want to make sure. So I do offer a 20-minute discovery call with all of them because not everybody is a good patient or client. So you can make an appointment there through the contact page. I'm in Houston, but I do all remote care.
Yeah, I just found you on Instagram, followed you, so I got you.
Yeah,
I knew,
great.
I knew I saw you on Twitter, but I didn't know you were up on Instagram. So, and then the 20-minute discovery call, because it's interesting. So, who might not be a good fit for you? I mean, where would you say I'm not going to be able to work well with you?
It's a gut feeling. Some people personality, you just know they're just not going to be the right people, asking the wrong questions, really asking for quick fixes. Usually it's like if I don't feel like the personality, they don't want to do the work, they want the quick fixes, I discourage them from working with me, or they want something that I not my forte. Like if people are coming in thin and all, but all they have is gut issues and things like that. I can work with them. Everybody improves, but it's not my interest. So I usually tell them, look, I'm not the right person for you. So before they commit to the 4 months, I usually like to talk to them, make sure I understand what they're looking for, and make sure it fits.
And you mentioned 4 months. So is that kind of like, you feel like I need that much time to really make an impact?
I do think it takes 3 to 4 months to change your lifestyle. I know that from myself, from multiple fair. I know that from the clients I worked with. First 2 months are really more intensive and hands-on. Eventually, they become their own tweaking and just kind of bouncing ideas. As they become more on par in terms of level of knowledge. And it's been very helpful to have that. I do think most people stick to that. I do give people the option to quit early if they want to. Nobody does. And some people even extend when they have so much more work to do.
Well, this has been very fun and awesome.
Thanks.
I've got to go do a consultation myself
Yeah,
here in
yeah.
a few minutes. So, Eli, thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you,
Just
Sean.
let us know if anything changed we can help you with. Because, like I said, I want to. I like to see as many physicians as possible sort of adopt this, and we can maybe together make a big difference
Oh,
in
absolutely.
our
I
in
love
our
what you're doing. I'm
community.
actually invested in your company because I
Oh,
believe
thank
in
you.
it so much.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we make you some money, man. That's the goal. So
That's not the deal. I think it's
I know,
important.
but
Yeah.
regardless, because that means we're successful. If we're
Yeah.
successful, we're going to help, lots and lots of people. So
Awesome. It's been
awesome.
a
We'll
pleasure.
see you back tomorrow. Thanks everybody. And you guys have a great day. Got to run now.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.